Friends, what should have been a beautiful fresh start for Jenny and Sumit quickly turned into something far more emotional, uncomfortable, and explosive than anyone expected. After everything they have already survived, the heartbreak, the lies, the family pressure, the distance, the judgment, and the endless fight to simply be together, most people would assume that finally starting this new chapter would bring them peace. But peace is the one thing that never seems to stay around Jenny and Sumit for long. Because the moment these two try to enjoy even a little happiness, family drama comes crashing in and reminds them that in their world, love is never allowed to be simple. And this time, the tension is not small. It is personal, it is emotional, and it threatens to shake the very foundation of the life they are trying so hard to build together. From the outside, Jenny and Sumit's story has always looked like a love story built on pure stubbornness. No matter how many people stood against them, no matter how many warnings they received, no matter how many tears were shed along the way, they kept choosing each other. That alone made their journey unforgettable. But what many people forget is that choosing each other was only the beginning. Staying together, living together, facing daily family pressure together, that is the real battle. And in these first days of this new phase, it becomes painfully clear that the old wounds in Sumit's family have never truly healed. They have only been pushed aside, waiting for the right moment to reopen. Jenny comes into this moment hoping that time may have softened hearts. She wants normalcy. She wants acceptance. She wants to feel like she is not constantly walking into a storm. She has already sacrificed so much to be with Sumit, leaving behind familiarity, comfort, and stability to build a life in a place where she still feels judged by some of the people who should have embraced her by now. She is not asking for luxury. She is not even asking for perfection. She is asking for basic respect, for the kind of peace that married couples deserve. But the reality she faces is far colder. The tension in the family does not disappear just because papers are signed or years have passed. In many ways, it has grown deeper, because now the relationship is no longer some passing phase people hoped would end. Now it is permanent. Now it is real. And that reality is harder for some relatives to accept than ever before. Sumit, on the other hand, stands in the middle of two worlds that continue pulling him apart. On one side is Jenny, the woman he chose, the woman he fought for, the woman he says he loves enough to risk everything for. On the other side is his family, whose expectations, traditions, and emotional control still hold enormous power over him. And that is where the trouble begins. Because even when a man says he has made his choice, it does not mean the guilt disappears. It does not mean the pressure stops. It does not mean the emotional strings are cut. Sumit may want to move forward, but every difficult conversation, every disappointed look, every reminder of what his family expected from him pulls him right back into the same painful cycle. He wants to keep everyone calm. He wants Jenny to feel secure. He wants his family to stop fighting. But trying to please everyone may be the exact thing that causes everything to fall apart again. As these first days unfold, the cracks begin to show almost immediately. There is no warm, easy transition into family harmony. There is no magical moment where everyone suddenly accepts the situation and decides to move on. Instead, what hangs in the air is discomfort, resentment, and unresolved anger. Every interaction feels loaded. Every conversation feels like it could turn into an argument. Even the smallest issue carries the weight of years of bitterness. And Jenny can feel it. She is not blind. She can tell when smiles are forced, when words are polite but cold, when she is being tolerated instead of welcomed. That kind of energy wears a person down. It turns simple visits into emotional tests. It makes a woman question whether she will ever truly belong. And the more she senses that nothing has really changed, the more the fear begins to creep in. What if this so-called new beginning is just the old nightmare in a different form? What if the family drama never ends? What if she gave up everything for a life that will always feel unstable? That fear is not dramatic. It is human. And anyone in Jenny's position would feel it too. What makes the situation even harder is that family drama is never just about one argument. It is about history. It is about patterns. It is about all the things people never fully said and all the things they said too harshly to ever take back. In this case, the baggage is heavy. There were doubts from the beginning. There were accusations. There was pain, embarrassment, resistance, and public judgment. Some people around them never believed this relationship would last. Others never believed it should have existed in the first place. So when Jenny and Sumit try to step into a calm domestic life, they are not stepping into an empty room. They are stepping into a room already crowded with years of emotional damage. And that damage has its own voice. It shows up in tense silences. It shows up in criticism disguised as concern. It shows up in subtle ways that are sometimes more painful than shouting, because they remind Jenny that she is still seen as the outsider, the disruption, the woman who changed the script of what Sumit's life was supposed to be. But Jenny is not the type to quietly disappear. She has fought too hard, cried too much, and waited too long to pretend that disrespect does not hurt. She wants to be understanding, yes. She wants to avoid conflict where possible. But she also knows her worth. She knows that she did not come all this way to live as if she must apologize for loving her own husband. And that inner frustration starts to build. You can see it in the way she reacts when things feel unfair. You can hear it in her voice when she talks about wanting peace but never quite getting it. There is a limit to how much tension one person can absorb before it turns into pain, and then pain turns into anger. Jenny may love Sumit deeply, but love does not erase loneliness. Love does not erase feeling unwanted by the people closest to your partner. Love does not erase the exhaustion of constantly proving that your relationship deserves to exist. And so the emotional stakes get higher by the day. Meanwhile, Sumit is forced again to confront a truth he may never fully escape. Choosing Jenny was not a one-time act of bravery. It is a choice he has to keep making over and over, especially when family pressure returns. It is easy to stand beside your wife when the cameras are rolling and everything is calm for 5 minutes. It is much harder when real-life guilt starts flooding in, when family members are upset, when traditions are used as weapons, when emotional blackmail enters the room without even needing to raise its voice. That is when a marriage is tested. That is when a husband's loyalty becomes visible. And that is where viewers start watching Sumit most closely. Because the question is no longer whether he loves Jenny. The question is whether he has the strength to protect the life he built with her when the people who raised him make that protection feel like betrayal. In relationships like this, what destroys peace is not always one major betrayal. Sometimes it is hesitation. Sometimes it is passivity. Sometimes it is the partner who keeps saying, just wait, just be patient, just give them time, while the other person keeps getting hurt in the process. If Jenny begins to feel that Sumit still cannot fully stand firm, that frustration could become explosive. Because patience is not endless. And the woman who once waited through impossible odds may now be asking herself how much more of her emotional energy she can spend just trying to survive another round of the same family storm. There is also the matter of expectation versus reality. For a long time, the dream was simple. Once they are together, things will settle down. Once the hardest obstacles are over, life will become easier. Once the commitment is official, surely people will stop fighting it. But real life often punishes those kinds of hopeful assumptions. Sometimes the moment you think the war is over is the exact moment a deeper, more exhausting battle begins. Because then you are not fighting for the fantasy anymore. You are fighting for daily peace, for emotional safety, for the right to wake up without dread. And for Jenny and Sumit, that daily peace still seems painfully out of reach. Even small family encounters now carry huge emotional meaning. A simple comment can trigger old pain. A cold reaction can ruin an entire day. A visit can feel more like a test than a connection. The emotional atmosphere becomes so fragile that everybody starts adjusting their words, their body language, their expectations. That is not family harmony. That is emotional survival. And it leaves no room for true comfort. The tragedy here is that Jenny and Sumit do not need perfection to be happy. They just need enough peace to breathe. But peace cannot grow in a house full of resentment. It cannot survive where people are more committed to old anger than to moving forward. And so every hopeful step they take is met with another reminder that some hearts have not softened at all. That realization is devastating. Because it means the fresh start they imagined may never arrive in the way they dreamed. It also raises another difficult issue. What happens when love becomes isolated? A couple can survive a lot when they feel united against the world. But isolation has a cost. Over time, it can make small disagreements bigger. It can make stress harder to manage. It can create a pressure cooker effect where outside tension starts turning inward. And that is the real danger. Family drama does not have to directly break a couple apart to do damage. Sometimes it slowly poisons the atmosphere around them until they start snapping at each other, doubting each other, blaming each other for a pain that originally came from the outside. Jenny may begin to wonder why she still has to endure this. Sumit may begin to feel overwhelmed by the impossible position he is in. And suddenly the enemy is no longer just disapproving relatives. The enemy becomes exhaustion itself. That is when marriages start slipping, not always through one giant scandal, but through repeated emotional wear and tear. Still, if there is one thing Jenny and Sumit have shown again and again, it is endurance. Their story has never been easy. It has never been smooth. It has never looked like the kind of romance built on ease and approval. It has looked messy, unconventional, emotional, and at times chaotic. But it has also looked determined. They have kept holding on when almost nobody expected them to. That is why this stage matters so much. This is not just another dramatic moment for television. This is a serious test of whether the life they fought for can actually function under continued pressure. Can they create boundaries strong enough to protect their marriage? Can Sumit finally draw a line that is not temporary, not weak, not apologetic, but firm? Can Jenny keep opening her heart in a place where she still feels judged? Can they stop surviving and finally start living? Those are the questions hanging over every tense interaction. And the answers may define the future of their relationship more than any romantic promise ever did. Because love can start a relationship, but boundaries, loyalty, and emotional courage are what keep it alive when family conflict refuses to die. Right now, Jenny and Sumit stand at a turning point. They can either allow old family wounds to keep dictating the mood of their marriage, or they can decide that enough is enough and build a stronger wall around their peace. That choice is not easy. It comes with pain either way. If they keep trying to please everyone, they may lose themselves. If they choose their own peace more aggressively, they may face even greater backlash. There is no painless route forward. But one truth is becoming impossible to ignore. This new beginning will not survive on hope alone. It will require action. It will require honesty. It will require Sumit to be clearer than he has ever been. And it will require Jenny to keep believing that her place in this life is valid, even when others refuse to fully grant it. So yes, what was supposed to be a hopeful first chapter has already become tangled in family drama, emotional tension, and the same painful questions that have followed them for years. But maybe that is exactly why this moment matters. Because this time, they cannot just focus on winning each other. They already did that. Now they have to win the harder fight, the fight for stability, dignity, and peace inside a life that still feels crowded by judgment. And if they fail to do that, then this new beginning may not feel new at all. It may simply become another chapter in the same painful story. But if they finally learn how to stand together without apology, without hesitation, and without letting anyone else write the rules of their marriage, then maybe, just maybe, this drama-filled beginning could become the moment they stopped being tested by the past and started protecting their future. But if they finally learn how to stand together without apology, without hesitation, and without letting anyone else write the rules of their marriage, then maybe, just maybe, this drama-filled beginning could become the moment everything starts to change. Because right now, what Jenny and Sumit are facing is not just another disagreement or uncomfortable family visit. This is a deeper emotional crossroads where every decision they make from this point forward will either strengthen their bond or slowly weaken it from the inside. And the pressure is building in a way that feels impossible to ignore. You can see it in Jenny's expressions, the quiet frustration, the tired patience, the moments where she looks like she is holding back words that have been sitting inside her for too long. She has been strong for years, stronger than most people would ever need to be in a relationship, but strength has its limits. There comes a time when even the most patient person starts asking a simple but powerful question: how much more do I have to take before something truly changes? And that question is dangerous because once it is asked, it does not go away easily. It lingers, it grows, It starts influencing how every situation is perceived. A small comment no longer feels small. A cold reaction no longer feels temporary. Everything begins to feel like part of a larger pattern that may never end. And for Jenny, that realization is beginning to settle in. She is no longer just reacting to moments. She is starting to question the entire environment she is living in. And when that happens, it is no longer just about family drama. It becomes about emotional survival. At the same time, Sumit finds himself under a different kind of pressure, one that is less visible but just as intense. He is carrying the weight of expectations from both sides, and those expectations are completely opposite. Jenny expects him to stand firmly beside her, to protect their relationship, to create a safe emotional space where she does not constantly feel like she is being judged or pushed aside. His family, on the other hand, expects him to remain connected to their values, their traditions, and their authority. They may not say it directly every time, but the message is always there, reminding him of who he was before Jenny, of the life they imagined for him, of the path he was supposed to follow. And trying to live in both of those realities at once is exhausting, because every time he leans slightly in one direction, he feels like he is betraying the other. But here's the truth that Sumit can no longer avoid. There is no middle ground left. That illusion has been tested again and again, and every time it has failed. You cannot build a peaceful marriage while constantly negotiating its boundaries with people who do not fully accept it. At some point, a clear line has to be drawn. Not a temporary line, not a line that moves depending on who is upset that day, but a firm, consistent line that defines what is acceptable and what is not. And until that happens, Jenny will continue feeling unstable, and Sumit will continue feeling torn. This is why the tension in these first days feels so intense. It is not just about one argument. It is about the realization that nothing fundamental has changed unless they make it change. The situation is not going to magically improve on its own. Time has already proven that. Years have passed, conversations have happened, promises have been made, but the core conflict remains. And that is what makes this moment different. Because now, they can no longer pretend that patience alone will solve everything. Now they have to act. Now they have to decide what kind of life they are actually willing to live. And that decision is not easy. Because taking control of your life often means upsetting the people who are used to having control over it. It means facing backlash. It means being misunderstood. It means being labeled as selfish or disrespectful when, in reality, you are simply trying to protect your peace. And not everyone is strong enough to handle that kind of pressure. But if Sumit cannot handle it, then Jenny will continue paying the emotional price for it. And that is where the real tension lies. Not just in what the family says or does, but in how Sumit responds to it. Every moment of hesitation sends a message. Every time he avoids confrontation to keep things calm, it may actually create more long-term damage. Because calm on the surface does not mean peace underneath. Sometimes it just means the conflict has been delayed, not resolved. And delayed conflict has a way of coming back stronger, louder, and more painful than before. Jenny understands this, even if she does not always say it directly. She has lived through enough of these cycles to recognize the pattern. And that is why her patience now feels different. It is not the hopeful patience of someone who believes everything will get better soon. It is the cautious patience of someone who is watching closely, waiting to see if real change is finally going to happen. And if it does not, that patience could quickly turn into something else entirely. Something sharper, something more decisive. Because there comes a point where staying silent no longer feels like strength. It starts feeling like self-neglect. And Jenny is not someone who will ignore her own feelings forever. Meanwhile, the family dynamic continues to add layers of complexity to the situation. Every interaction carries emotional weight. A simple gathering is no longer just a gathering. It becomes a stage where acceptance or rejection is silently communicated. A casual conversation can suddenly turn into a moment of tension if the wrong topic is brought up. Even body language becomes important. Who sits where? Who speaks first? Who avoids eye contact? Who offers warmth? Who withholds it? These details may seem small, but in a situation like this, they speak louder than words. And Jenny notices them all. She feels the difference between genuine acceptance and false politeness. She can tell when she is being included and when she is simply being tolerated. And over time, that distinction becomes exhausting to live with, because nobody wants to feel like a guest in their own life. Nobody wants to feel like their presence is something others are still trying to get used to, especially not after everything she and Sumit have already gone through to be together. This is where the emotional risk becomes even greater. Because if Jenny starts feeling like she will never truly belong in Sumit's world, she may begin to emotionally withdraw, not from Sumit himself, but from the environment around them. And that kind of withdrawal can slowly create distance, not physical distance, but emotional distance. The kind that is harder to notice at first, but more dangerous over time. Conversations become shorter. Reactions become more controlled. Feelings become less openly shared. And before anyone realizes it, the relationship starts losing the openness that once made it strong. That is the silent effect of unresolved external pressure. It does not always explode immediately. Sometimes it slowly changes how two people connect with each other. Sumit may not even realize when this shift begins. He may think everything is still okay because there are no big fights happening between him and Jenny. But the absence of big fights does not mean the absence of problems. Sometimes it just means the problems have moved deeper, where they are harder to see but more difficult to fix. That is why what happens next is so important. Because this is the moment where awareness has to turn into action. It is not enough for Sumit to understand that Jenny is struggling. He has to show her, through clear and consistent behavior, that she is his priority. Not just in words, not just in private conversations, but in the way he handles situations with his family. That is what will rebuild her sense of security. That is what will remind her why she chose this life in the first place. And on Jenny's side, there is also a difficult balance she has to maintain. Standing up for herself is necessary, but doing so in a way that does not completely destroy any chance of future peace is equally important. It is a delicate line to walk, expressing her feelings honestly without letting the situation escalate into something that becomes even harder to repair. But that is the reality of complex relationships. There are no perfect moves, only better and worse ones, and every choice carries consequences. As these first days continue, the emotional atmosphere remains unpredictable. There are moments where things seem calm, almost hopeful, where it feels like maybe, just maybe, things are starting to settle. But those moments are fragile. They can change quickly with one comment, one misunderstanding, one reminder of the past that no one has fully let go of. And that constant uncertainty creates a kind of emotional fatigue that is hard to describe unless you have lived it. It is the feeling of never fully relaxing, of always being slightly on edge, of knowing that peace could disappear at any moment. And living like that for too long can wear down even the strongest relationship. This is why what Jenny and Sumit need right now is not just time. They need clarity. They need boundaries. They need decisions that are not temporary solutions but long-term commitments to a healthier dynamic. Because without those things, this new beginning will continue to feel like a continuation of the same old struggle. And eventually, even the strongest love can become tired of fighting the same battle over and over again. Still, there is one thing that keeps this story from becoming hopeless. And that is the fact that both Jenny and Sumit have already proven they are willing to fight for each other. They have done it before under even more extreme circumstances. They have chosen each other when it was easier to walk away. They have stayed when others expected them to break. That kind of commitment is rare, and it matters, because it means that even in the middle of all this tension, there is still a foundation worth protecting. The question now is whether they can evolve, whether they can take everything they have learned from their past struggles and use it to create a better future, not just by surviving problems, but by actively preventing them from repeating in the same way. That requires growth. That requires courage. That requires a willingness to do things differently, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. Because doing the same things will only lead to the same results. And right now, the results they have been getting are not enough to sustain the life they want. So as this chapter unfolds, one thing becomes clear. This is not just about family drama. This is about identity, loyalty, boundaries, and the kind of life two people choose to build together when the world around them refuses to make it easy. Jenny and Sumit are no longer just fighting to be together. They are fighting for the quality of that togetherness. And that is a much more complex battle. One that cannot be won with love alone. It requires action. It requires strength. It requires a clear understanding that sometimes protecting your relationship means making difficult choices that not everyone will agree with. And until those choices are made, the tension will remain, the questions will remain, and the future will remain uncertain. But if they do find the strength to finally take control of their own story, then this chaotic, emotional, drama-filled beginning could still turn into something meaningful, something stable, something real. Because at the end of the day, love is not proven by how hard you fight to start a relationship. It is proven by how strong you stand to protect it when everything around you is trying to pull it apart. And right now, that is the challenge Jenny and Sumit can no longer avoid.